Cuando tu hija está aprendiendo a manejar, dices...
¡Híjole!
Pero ¿por qué no mejor dices?
Como un buen vecino, State Farm está ahí.
Para ayudarte a escoger la cobertura que necesitas. State Farm, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into something critical. Cybersecurity.
Absolutely. It impacts pretty much everyone now.
Specifically, we're looking at ransomware, that threat that just keeps changing, and maybe more importantly, what you can actually do about it, how to prepare.
Yeah, the preparation part is key. We're drawing on some great insights here, partly from that recent STIC cybersecurity conference down in Panama.
Right, the STIC event.
Yeah.
And also some analysis from a leading expert in incident response, handling these attacks when they happen.
That's the plan.
So our mission today, cut through the noise, get to the core of it. What is ransomware now? Why should you care? And, crucially, what do the experts say actually works in terms of defense?
And that Panama conference is a good place to start, right? It sets the stage.
It really does. It wasn't just a small regional thing, was it?
Oh, not at all. The source material mentioned a huge participation. Over 17 organizations, I think, from more than 33 countries.
Wow, 33 countries. So truly global.
Definitely. Not just Ibero-America, but, participants from all over. It showed how widespread these challenges are.
So people from completely different contexts, different governments, different industries, all facing similar problems.
Pretty much, yeah. Lots of common ground, shared experiences with attacks. And the big theme that kept coming up.
Let me guess. Sharing information.
Exactly. Collaboration, cooperation, sharing what works and what doesn't. The feeling was very much, we're all in this together. You can't fight this stuff alone.
Were there specific examples people talked about there? Real-world cases?
Yeah, a couple were highlighted. There was talk about that blackout in Spain. Initially, people thought, okay, cyber attack, right?
Yeah, that's the immediate suspicion these days.
But it turned out it wasn't confirmed as one in the end. Still, the discussion itself was valuable.
Okay, interesting. Any others?
Then you had the flip side. Costa Rica shared their experience with a really massive cyber attack, one that hit the whole country. Really significant impact.
A countrywide attack. That really drives home the stakes, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And hearing those stories firsthand, what happened, the response, the lessons learned, that's incredibly valuable for everyone else listening.
Yeah, I can see how that sharing is just essential. These aren't just abstract threats.
No, they're very real. And learning from others' experiences is crucial.
Okay, so let's use that global context and zoom in on ransomware specifically. Based on the expert analysis, what's the verdict? Is it getting worse? Smarter?
The expert put it pretty bluntly. Ransomware is in full form. It's a mature, professional, and very profitable criminal business.
Right. It's not just kids in basements anymore.
Not at all. Highly organized.
What about when we hear news that, a big ransomware group like Conti or Lockbit has supposedly shut down? Does that mean the threat's easing up?
Well, the expert cautioned against that thinking. Often these shutdowns are more like internal changes. Maybe they're rebranding to avoid heat or splitting up or merging into other groups.
So the people and the tools are still out there.
Pretty much, yeah. The underlying threat capability doesn't just vanish. It persists.
The sources also drew a line between ransomware and state-sponsored attacks, right?
Yeah.
Different motives.
Yes, that's an important distinction. Ransomware, like we said, is usually pure cybercrime. It's about the money. Get in, encrypt, get paid.
Okay.
State-sponsored groups, often called APTs, advanced persistent threats, their goal is usually different. Espionage, intelligence gathering, maybe disruption, but for state objectives, not usually direct financial profit in the same way.
But do they use similar methods to break in, the technical side?
Very often, yes. The tools, the vulnerabilities they exploit, the ways they move through networks, a lot of overlap in techniques. The goal, once they're inside, is the main difference.
Okay, so focusing back on ransomware and its goal money, can you walk us through the typical attack chain? How does it usually play out?
Sure. It generally follows a pattern. First, they need to get that initial foothold, the intrusion.
Get it in the door somehow.
Right. Then, once they're in, they need to increase their permissions, get more control. That's privilege escalation.
Get the admin keys, basically.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Then comes the main event. Encrypting the systems, locking up the data. And finally, the ransom demand. Pay up for the key.
But that's where things have changed, right? This double extortion tactic the source mentioned.
Exactly. That's a really significant evolution. It happened because, companies started getting better at recovering without paying.
Better backups, disaster recovery plans, that sort of thing.
Precisely. If you can restore your data from backups, maybe you don't need the attacker's decryption key as desperately. So the attackers lost some leverage.
So they needed a new pressure point.
They found one. They adapted. Now, before they encrypt everything, they steal your sensitive data.
So they grab the goods first,
Yeah.
then lock the place down. What kind of data are we talking about?
It's quite strategic, according to the source. They go for the really sensitive stuff. Personal data, think employee payrolls, copies of IDs, passports, national ID cards.
Well, wow.
Medical records, if it's a hospital or clinic. Customer databases, anything that's protected and sensitive.
Why that specific focus? Is it just what they can sell?
It's actually shrewder than that. The expert called the attackers quite sharp on this. They've clearly paid attention to data protection laws, GDPR in Europe, various laws in the US, Latin America.
Okay. How does that help them?
They know that if a company gets breached and sensitive personal data is exposed because security wasn't good enough, that company faces major legal trouble. Investigations, huge fines from regulators.
Right. The data breach, notification laws, and potential penalties.
Exactly. So the attackers weaponize that risk. They don't just hold your systems hostage, they hold your compliance record and reputation hostage too.
So how does that play out in the extortion?
They'll contact the company, show them proof, a sample of the sensitive data they stole, and threaten to publish all of it, usually on dark web leak sites, often hosted on Tor, unless, of course, the ransom is paid.
That sounds like an absolutely impossible situation for a company.
It really is. The source was clear. Once that data is exfiltrated, once it's out of your control, there's almost nothing you can do technically to get it back or stop them from leaking it.
So you're stuck choosing between, well, facing the regulators and the public fallout, or paying criminals.
That's pretty much the dilemma. Negotiate with the attackers, pay the ransom, and hope they keep their word and delete the data, or face the consequences of the breach being made public, plus the regulatory heat.
And do they usually delete the data if paid? Is there any trust there?
Well, trust is maybe the wrong word, but the expert did note that, based on experience, groups often don't publish the data if they receive payment. It's bad for their business model if word gets out that paying doesn't stop the leak. But still
negotiating with criminals under extreme duress.
Exactly. It's a horrible position driven entirely by the risk they've created around that stolen sensitive data.
Okay, that's a sobering look at the threat. Let's shift focus. What can be done? The source is really hammered on preparation.
Absolutely. That was the biggest takeaway on the defense side. The core mindset has to be assume a crisis will happen.
Not if, but when.
Precisely. And because of that, having a practiced, ready-to-go crisis protocol isn't optional. It's essential.
The source mentioned a real case where that made all the difference. You just can't make this stuff up on the fly when everything's burning down.
No way. Improvisation during an incident. The expert called that the worst thing you can do.
So how do you even practice for something this chaotic?
Simulations are key. They talked about tabletop exercises.
Right, and I've heard of those. Like a cyber fire drill.
Sort of, yeah. You get all the key players in a room, IT, security, legal, communications, senior management, and you walk them through a realistic attack scenario.
So it's not just technical. It's about how everyone works together.
Exactly. The point is to see how the whole organization reacts under pressure. Does communication break down? Does legal know what to do? Does comms have a plan? You simulate the stress, the water up to their neck feeling, as the expert put it.
To find the weaknesses before a real attack does.
That's the idea. Because preparation, they stressed, is the single most important part of the whole incident response lifecycle.
And preparation means more than just having the CEO's mobile number, right?
Oh, much more. It means documented procedures. Who calls who? What's the escalation path? It means having agreements, SLAs, service-level agreements already set up with any external cybersecurity firms you might need to call in for help.
So they can respond quickly.
Instantly, ideally. You need those contracts and access arrangements sorted before the crisis. If you're trying to negotiate contracts and permissions while your network is down, well, as the expert said, you suffer a lot.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's get into the technical weeds a bit. How are attackers actually getting that first foothold these days? What are the common entry points?
According to the source, the most common vector they see. Still the lack of second-factor authentication 2FA on some kind of external access point. VPNs, remote desktop, email.
So just a username and password isn't enough?
Absolutely not. Attackers get hold of credentials all the time. Data breaches, phishing. Sometimes they buy them from access brokers, criminals who specialize in just getting initial access and selling it.
So they just log in?
If there's no 2FA, yeah, often they can just walk in the front door, even with low-level user rights initially. That's enough. Less common, but still happens, is exploiting an unpatched vulnerability on a system facing the internet.
Okay, so stolen credentials plus lack of 2FA is a big one. Once they're inside, what's the next move? You mentioned privilege escalation.
Right. They land somewhere, maybe as a regular user, then they scan the internal network. They're looking for ways to move sideways, laterally, and gain more power.
And what are they usually targeting?
A prime target is often the Active Directory domain controllers. These systems manage user accounts and permissions for the whole network, usually.
So controlling that gives them the keys to the kingdom.
Pretty much. And they often exploit configuration flaws within Active Directory itself, things that weren't set up quite securely to elevate their privileges. It's often a very structured, methodical process.
How fast does this happen from getting in to taking over?
This was one of the really startling points. The time to ransom from that initial breach to launching the encryption can be incredibly fast. We're talking potentially just hours.
Hours, even in a company with, like, firewalls and antivirus.
Even in companies with some security tools, yes. These attackers are often very efficient. They use automated scripts. Sometimes they even use legitimate built-in Windows tools living off the land techniques that might not trigger basic alerts.
Wow. Hours. That completely changes the game for defense. You need to react fast.
Instantly, which leads to the core technical defenses the expert laid out, kind of the essential checklist, the ABC for any company.
Okay, what are they?
Number 1, second factor authentication. Everywhere. On all external access points, critical internal systems, non-negotiable.
Got it. 2FA everywhere. What's next?
Number 2, patching. Keep everything updated. Software, operating systems, firmware, constantly. Close those known security holes.
Patch. Okay. 3?
Number 3, modern endpoint detection and response, EDR tools. On servers, on user laptops and desktops, PCs, Macs, Linux. This is way beyond old school antivirus. It looks for suspicious behavior, not just known virus signatures.
EDR. So better detection. But detection isn't enough if no one's watching.
Exactly. That's number 4, and it's critical. You need a service or an internal team that can react immediately, think minutes or hours to the alerts the EDR generates. An alert at 2 a.m. needs someone looking at it at 2 a.m.
Rapid response capability. Makes sense, given the speed you mentioned.
It's vital. Early detection plus rapid response is how you start them before they encrypt. And number 5.
The last piece.
Ensure Active Directory and other critical systems are configured securely. Harden them. Avoid those common misconfigurations that attackers love to exploit for privilege escalation.
Okay, so 2FA, patching, EDR, rapid response, secure configuration. That's the foundation.
That's the core technical foundation. And layered on top of that, just having visibility, not relying on a single tool, is also important.
It sounds like a constant effort, though, not a set it and forget it thing.
Absolutely not. The experts stressed this requires permanent analysis, permanent monitoring, because the ability to react quickly, well, the future of the organization might depend on it.
That really puts it in perspective. Okay, let's try to pull this all together. A huge amount of really crucial information here.
Yeah, it's a complex landscape.
So the big takeaways seem to be ransomware is definitely not going away. It's professional, profitable, and using smarter tactics like double extortion, stealing that sensitive data to pressure companies over regulations and reputation.
Check. That's the threat side.
And on the defense side, while it's tough, the focus has to be on assuming you'll be targeted. That means serious preparation, having crisis plans, practicing them with simulations like tabletop exercises, getting external help lined up before you need it.
Preparation is paramount, yes.
And then backing that up with those fundamental technical controls. Lockdown access with 2FA everywhere. Patch relentlessly. Use modern EDR for detection. Have a team ready to respond immediately. And make sure your core systems like AD are configured securely.
That's a pretty good summary of the expert consensus from the sources. It's multi-layered, requires continuous effort, but that combination is the best defense available.
Right. It's not easy, but it's what's necessary.
Seems so.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, our listeners, to chew on after all this. We heard that attackers can go from getting that first initial foothold to full-blown ransomware deployment in potentially just a few hours. Knowing that speed, how does that change your perspective on how urgent preparation and rapid response really are? Not just for big companies, but maybe even for securing your own data, your own digital life.